Okay, I'm going to call the conference to order. Just prior to the adjournment, we had the Chair of Standing Orders move Standing Orders Report number 3, and that report, as you may remember, recommended that the outstanding business in relation to finance and foreign affairs and trade would be taken first in this session. And the report was moved, but it wasn't seconded and it wasn't voted on. But it did seem to be non-contentious. But just to keep things right, is there a seconder for? We've loads of seconders. Is it agreed? Agreed. So now I'm going to call on Dublin Bay North Constituency Council to move motion number 46. Alison. And again, can I emphasise, please, that people would say their name and branch or constituency or whatever.
Councillor Alison Gilliland, Sandra Kilmore Branch, Dublin Bay North, proposing motion 46. Colleagues, we have seen through our conference motions our extensive emphasis and commitment to fully resourced public, not outsourced, but public services such as childcare, education, supports for special needs and sláinte care, as well as sustainable housing where everybody can afford secure roof over their heads. We'll also later be committing to investment in a cleaner, greener environment and economy. We want to ensure as well that our citizens, particularly the most vulnerable, live within a threshold of decency when out of work, ill, disabled or retired. The one big question remaining for us is how are we going to fund what we aspire to? Where is the money going to come from? And this is the tenet of this motion. Looking at our current taxation and social insurance system, many people have bought into the myth that we are a high-tax country, that the more people removed from the so-called tax net, the better. Except when it comes to TD's salaries and allowance to the President, there is limited conversation with regard to why we actually pay tax, how it's invested or how it's redistributed. There's no tangible joining up of the dots between what we contribute and our public services and our welfare system. Neither is there a conversation about the effectiveness of special tax treatments as a means of incentivising the economy, or indeed tax loopholes that allow, for example, real estate investment trusts to pay very little tax on their profits from rent. Therefore, our taxation and social insurance system needs to be radically overhauled. And because of our intrinsic values of social justice, fairness and equality, we are the only party capable of challenging current thinking, capable of challenging current policy and capable of leading its reform. We need a system that affords a broader, more proportionate and transparent collection of taxation. We need to throw out the narrow two-band system with its tax credits and banded tax reliefs and introduce a more graduated or incremental banded system, starting with a small percentage payment and gradually increasing in line with earnings. I personally believe that everyone should contribute to our income tax system as a contribution to the public services we all benefit from, and that any tax reliefs should be offered at a flat rate and used to support sustainability. For these reasons, I think we should look more closely at the future of the USC. It's clear and transparent and leaves financial consultants nowhere to hide. This is vitally important if our citizens' contributions are to be fair, just, equal and transparent. We also need to look beyond tax on income from work to more effectively taxing all types of income and holdings. We have a generous corporation tax, but too many loopholes. So we need to ensure at the very least that corporations pay their full dues. On the other hand, we need to consider how we treat small domestic businesses, particularly in their start-up phase, so that this vital side of our economy is allowed to prosper and, in the long term, reduce our reliance on the sometimes volatile multinational sector. We also need to retain our local property tax. Not in its present form, it needs some of its rough edges smoothed out, but again, it needs to be linked to local council services. However, it's effective in that everyone pays and there are no loopholes. When it comes to our social insurance system, we need to discuss whether there should be a link between contributions paid in and contributions paid out, particularly with regard to unemployment benefit. Too often in the recession did we see workers lose well-paying jobs and very quickly get into mortgage distress due to the massive gap between their previous earnings and their state unemployment benefit. These are some opening or initial thoughts, and I've no doubt that at times in developing a new taxation and social insurance policy, we'll have many debates and many arguments. That should not deter us. It is absolutely essential that when we are asked the question about how we are going to fund our public services and social sustainability aspirations, that we stand proud and give them a comprehensive, well thought out, fair and just answer. Garmagov.
Thanks, Alison. Is there a seconder for the motion? Formally seconded, Tom. Thanks. Are you going to move?
Tom Cosgrave, Dublin Bay North, House Sutton branch. I'll keep this very brief, delegates, because my colleague, Councillor Gilliland, has outlined this in depth. I'll just say that taxation is investment in our society, in our communities. I think it's fair to say that some sectors of society do not pay their fair share of tax. Therefore, they are not making as full an investment as they should in our society and in our communities. So I think we need to really widen the tax bands, as Alison has said, and make sure that all sectors of society can see that other sectors of society are paying their fair share. So I'll leave it at that, and I'd ask you to support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. The mover of motion number 47 from Dublin West Constituency Council, John. And can I please emphasise that it's 3 minutes, everybody, not just you, John, everybody.
Thank you, Chair. I won't take that personally. John Walsh, Clonsella, Dublin West, proposing motion number 47. Colleagues, I suppose this is a straightforward motion, and it's about banks and bankers. And perhaps just a couple of examples of the current situation in terms of taxation and banks. And essentially, there isn't any. Last year, between Bank of Ireland, AIB and Permanent TSB, the three banks had combined profits of 2.5 billion, and yet they paid no tax whatsoever. AIB will not pay a cent in taxation for something like a 20-year period, despite making a half-yearly profit of over 800 million euro in the first half of last year. The CEO of AIB commented that AIB had a deferred tax asset of close to 3 billion, which is an impressive amount of money. The Department of Finance defended the current method of dealing with banks through the bank levy as a more appropriate method, rather than, as they said, messing with the tax system. But unfortunately, the current system is deeply unfair, and it messes with the interests of the taxpayer. It is a truism that banks benefited hugely from the bailout. They benefited from the support given by citizens and taxpayers throughout society. And it is right and fair now that they should pay their fair share in tax, preferably through a minimum effective tax, or failing that, through a doubling of the bank levy. And colleagues, we've also seen an extraordinary campaign by banking chief executives attempting to overturn the current cap of 500,000 per annum for senior bankers. Apparently, £500,000 is too miserly a sum to attract the right kind of talent to the banks. And this is being done at a time of continuing inequality in pay for teachers, guards and public servants. Colleagues, I think in the circumstances this campaign is simply obscene, and we should as a conference definitively reject it. And we will have an opportunity to do that with the emergency motion being taken tomorrow in relation to bankers' salaries. So delegates, I would commend the motion to you. It's crucial that banks pay their fair share in taxation. It's crucial in terms of tax justice, and also it's crucial for the credibility of the tax system, and that's what the Labour Party should stand for. Thank you.
Well, thank you, John. Is there a seconder for motion number 47? Formally seconded. Thank you, delegates. And motion number 48 now, in the name of Longford Westmeath Constituency Council. Deputy Willie Penrose.
This motion is intrinsically about Labour values, and it will be seconded by my colleague Lorraine Scally. It is about our economy escaping from being held to ransom by banks driven by an ethos of profit maximisation, and instead our communities having access to alternative financial services based on the common good. The concept of a public bank is poorly understood in an Irish context. A public bank is emphatically not a nationalised bank like AIB. A public banking model called Sparkus has existed in Germany for over 200 years. It will be municipally owned, not a nationalised bank. It will be not for profit and be restricted to lending to its own regional economy for its business. It would fill the gap left by the demise of business societies and serve enterprises formerly served by the SEC. And both the Post Office and the credit unions could earn additional income from selling public bank services across the county to the branches. And it would provide a suitable vehicle for the European Investment Bank to lend funds to the SMEs. Not only would such an Irish community banking service provide a strong alternative ethos into Irish financial services, it would free us from the dead hand of the pillar banks. In the past 2 years, I have debated the need for this service with numerous ministers. I have warned them and pointed out to them that the dead hand of the pillar banks can be seen in the policy making of the Department of Finance mandarins and their bureaucrats. In July this year, the bureaucrats wrote an incoherent report for the government opposing investment in a public banking system on the grounds it might crowd out the existing pillar banks. But once again, as I discovered in the bankruptcy legislation, the finance mandarins and of course the political masters confused the pillar bank's interests with the national interests. In doing so, they jeopardise future generations and risk our society being held to ransom by shareholder-driven, profit-maximising banks who think nothing of the common good and are quite content to let the taxpayer continue to pay for the mistakes. We see this in their demands to remove the bankers' pay cap, where they drag their feet reluctantly before admitting to robbing customers over tracker mortgages, and yet they are still throwing family homes to the vulture funds. The industry response to these concerns is to set up the Banking Culture Board. I'd like to say this is laudable, but let's be honest, this is really putting lipstick on a pig. 10 years after the crash, Ireland is still vulnerable to being held to ransom by the big banks. The AIB has done this to us twice before, and they won't hesitate to do it again. The credit unions have made it clear that they don't want to become banks, but they do need strength, and we need to support their services. Without them, people would be lost. And an Irish public banking network would fill the gap between the big banks and the credit unions. So this will not only help to reshape our financial services to the real economy, but it's an issue of vital national security. Does this government have the political will to think not just of the next general election, but to act like statesmen and think of the next generation? I commend this motion to the conference.
Thank you, Willie. 2 minutes and 44 seconds that took. So that's leadership.
Lorraine Scally.
Lorraine.
I am Lorraine Scally. I am from Cool, Mullingar, County Westmeath. I am local area representative with the Labour Party, and I'm standing in the next local elections. We are... So, as Willie Penrose TD pointed out, we are calling for the establishment of a pilot public bank in the Midlands with a view to rolling it out as a network of community public banks across Ireland. We note again, as Willie has said, that the German public banks called Sparkus have been in existence for 200 years. They've been key to ensuring stable, consistent flow of credit to SMEs in Germany, and so we acknowledge that they would fill, as Willie has pointed out, the gap in the financial service providers for SMEs at present. This public bank, we would hope, would not be a nationalised bank. It wouldn't be for profit. It would focus on regional development projects and would put its surplus into those. It would obviously fill the gap by the demise of the building societies. We hope it would allow the post offices, the credit unions to earn additional income and to stay afloat. It would provide a suitable vehicle, we hope, to lend funds to the SMEs, and it would complement the existing Irish credit union movement, which is very important. We also again condemn the efforts by the bureaucrats in the Department of Finance to ignore the development of a pilot community bank. And so we urge the Labour Party that it campaigns vigorously to establish a network of community banks to strengthen our credit unions, especially our rural post offices, and to support our struggling SMEs and regional development. Garmila Machoy.
Thank you, Lorraine. So now, motions number 46, 47 and 48 are properly before conference. Speakers, John, you wanted to speak on 48. Any other speakers offering, will they please come up to the front?
John Feely, Leitrim, Sligo Leitrim. Now, this is a difficult one for me, Chair, because I'm going to request the referral back of this motion on setting up a bank. And the reason I give at this point in time is, well, first of all, the proposal, and I compliment Willie on pushing this. I attended a function in Mullingar Credit Union where the case was made with the help from the members from the Sparkazan Bank. But where I see it is, I'm very active in the credit union movement, by the way, as well. So I see this model, as currently proposed, is really coming from on high, and I believe it should come from below. And the way I think it should be built via the credit union movement. We already have very weak banks. We have the permanent TSB is just almost gone. We have a state bank in AIB of 70%. And I must, just a little bit of warning, not all is not well with the Sparkassen model in Germany. I hate to have to say this because I admire a 200-year-old movement, but there's one, a retail unit of the Sparkassen, they're called Landesbanks. There's one, a very big one, with 160 billion of assets, 90% of Ireland's GNI, in trouble at this point in time. And it's either going to have to be bailed up by its owners, who are the state government, or the local Sparkassen, which owns 33% of it. Another option is it may have to merge with another Landesbank. So I don't want to, I'm not against the motion, but I would just prefer that it refer back and that we then study this in some more detail. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Is there a seconder for the reference back? Seconded? Seconded. Okay. So, any further speakers now on motions 46, 47 and 48? No further speakers. I invite Deputy Joan Burton to respond to the debate. Joan.
Well, thank you all for being here today and here this afternoon. First of all, I want to say that Willie has a point when he says that it appears that officials in the Department of Finance are extremely reluctant to support local banking, be that credit unions, post offices, or indeed the Sparkassen model. And I actually think that rural Ireland does need community banking, and that should be in conjunction with both the credit union movement and indeed with the post office. The same gentlemen, though, and by the way, they're mostly gentlemen in the Department of Finance and DPER, anytime I meet them. The same gentlemen, by the way, are much more into lifting the cap on bankers' salaries. Now, the bankers who are affected by the cap on their salaries are the bankers who were at the top of the banks and in senior executive positions from the time of the crash onwards. They earn a cool $500,000 a year. And I think, in the language of anybody in this room, someone who is privileged to earn $500,000 a year, plus benefits, other benefits, really, I don't think until they have paid back all of the money, the 65 billion or so, that the Irish public put into the banks, and which caused so much grief to so many individuals and families, until they've actually cleared that debt and they've actually started paying tax again. So, you know, it is puzzling as to why in the world of the Department of Finance there is really one law in terms of community banking for rural areas like Longford and Westmeath and places that Lorraine is hoping to represent come the next local elections. But there's another one for those people who are lucky enough and privileged enough to earn $500,000. And I think, you know, on that basis, we should support the motion from Longford Westmeath in relation to community banking. We had a very moving session here an hour ago, a couple of hours ago, in terms of meeting Vicky Phelan and Stephen Teep. And really that was about healthcare and the quality of healthcare in this country and access to it at the point of need. We discuss that in this party. What we don't discuss often enough is the funding. And what I proposed in the context of the current budget, and I'm delighted to support the motion from Dublin Bay North, is the idea that the universal social charge, which was further reduced in this budget, that we should actually hold on to it and we should convert it to a universal health payment, so that when we talk about Sláinte Care, and Jerry Burke and the other people who are on the platform today know that to implement Sláinte Care you need a fund of money. Now, we would have, in what remains of the universal social charge, if we convert it to a universal health charge, we would have funding that would help to get Sláinte Care off the ground, and the funding element in the USC is significant, so we could also ensure that a proportion of that goes, for instance, to mental health care, a really, really important and underfunded area of the health services. So I want to support that motion, and I want to support as well the Dublin West motion. Ireland is actually in the last chance saloon on digital taxation. Even the Tories in England, in the budget last week, said they're going to move to a digital tax on IT-style products to be paid from about 2020 onwards. France has advocated that, Spain, Italy and Austria. And really, we have to look at how, in an IT age, we get a fair flow of taxation from the activities of the really big IT companies locally and on a worldwide basis. And for the same reason, we need a financial transactions tax here in Europe and across the world that will allow money generated by people go back into their countries and communities on a fair basis, whether in Ireland or across the wider world. I recommend the motions to you, delegates.
Thank you, Joan. We're now going to vote on these motions. All in favour of motion 46, please show. All against. I declare the motion carried. Motion 47. All in favour, please show. All against. I declare the motion carried. And now there was a proposal to refer back motion 48, which was duly seconded. The movers of the motion inform me, to my right here, that they are not accepting reference back. So I'm going to put the proposal to refer back first. All in favour, please show.